My beloved child. There are moments in life that seem ordinary until the quiet whisper of heaven reveals that they never were. If these words have found you today, allow yourself a moment of stillness. There is something within this story that may speak to a part of your heart that has long waited to be heard. This is not a prophecy, nor is it a promise of future events. It is a fictional tale of hope, faith, love, and the mysterious ways people find the courage to heal. Your soul has carried questions that few people could ever see. Some nights you smiled while hiding battles that no one noticed. Some mornings you stood strong even though your heart felt heavier than your own footsteps. Yet through every silent struggle, heaven watched with compassion. Far beyond what your eyes could perceive, another heart was also learning difficult lessons. The one this story calls your soulmate had walked through misunderstandings, regrets, and moments of loneliness. They often wondered why certain memories refused to leave them. Every attempt to forget only reminded them that some connections are transformed not by time, but by truth. Today, something unexpected happened. It was not a miracle that stopped the sky or shook the earth. It was quieter than that. Sometimes heaven moves through a conversation, a forgotten photograph, an unexpected message, or a single sentence spoken at exactly the right time. As the sun crossed the afternoon sky, someone mentioned your name. The room fell silent for only a heartbeat. Your soulmate smiled politely, pretending those words meant nothing. But inside, memories awakened like sleeping embers touched by fresh air. The sound of your laughter returned. The kindness you once offered returned. Even the unfinished conversations they believed were buried forever came rushing back. For the first time in a long while, they asked themselves a question they had been avoiding. What if I never truly understood them? That single question became the beginning of everything. Sometimes heaven does not answer our prayers by changing another person overnight. Sometimes the answer begins when a heart becomes willing to see differently. As evening approached, your soulmate found themselves unable to focus. Familiar places suddenly reminded them of forgotten moments. Familiar songs carried unfamiliar meaning. Every ordinary detail became part of a much larger picture. They remembered the version of you that the world rarely noticed, the one who loved deeply, forgave quietly, and hoped even after disappointment. For reasons they could not explain, they felt as though they had overlooked something precious. And that realization frightened them more than they expected. Not because they believed they had lost you forever, but because they realized how easy it is to misunderstand someone whose heart has always spoken softly. Meanwhile, heaven remained silent. Not because heaven had abandoned either of you, but because some lessons become stronger when discovered instead of announced. Your soulmate stepped outside into the cool evening air. The wind carried no voices. The clouds formed no miraculous signs. Yet peace settled upon them in a way they had not experienced for a very long time. They closed their eyes. In that quiet moment, gratitude appeared before certainty. Instead of asking for answers, they simply whispered, "If there is still something I need to understand, help me see it." And sometimes, my beloved child, that humble prayer becomes the doorway through which healing first enters. They returned home believing the evening would continue as usual. It did not. Waiting among ordinary notifications was something that seemed almost insignificant. One message. Just one. It was not dramatic. It contained no extraordinary announcement. Yet every word gently dismantled assumptions they had carried for far too long. As they read, they realized that someone had finally shared the truth about you, not exaggerated, not distorted, but honestly. The picture they had carried in their minds slowly began to change. Regret appeared where certainty once stood. Compassion replaced judgment. Questions replaced conclusions. And for the first time in many months, they wondered whether distance had protected them from pain, or merely delayed understanding. That night became restless. They walked from room to room without knowing why. They reached for distractions that no longer distracted them. Again and again, your memory returned. Not as an accusation. Not as a burden. But as an invitation to reconsider everything. Meanwhile, unseen by both of you, heaven continued weaving together moments too small to notice individually, yet meaningful when viewed together. A delayed conversation. An unexpected reminder. A forgotten keepsake. A chance encounter. Each thread seemed unrelated. Yet together they formed a pattern neither heart could yet recognize. Perhaps that is one of life's quietest mysteries. The greatest turning points rarely announce themselves with thunder. More often, they begin with gentle conviction. They begin when someone finally chooses honesty over pride. Forgiveness over resentment. Understanding over assumption. Your soulmate sat in silence long after midnight. The world around them slept peacefully. Inside their heart, however, something had awakened that refused to return to sleep. They opened old conversations. Read familiar words with new eyes. Remembered moments they once misunderstood. Every memory carried another layer they had never noticed before. Then they whispered something no one else could hear. I wish I had listened more carefully. Those words echoed through the quiet room. Not because they changed the past, but because they opened the possibility of a different future. Far away, your own journey continued. You had no idea that someone else's perspective was beginning to shift. You simply kept living, growing, healing, and learning to trust that every season carries its own purpose. Sometimes we never know the silent battles another person is fighting on our behalf. Sometimes answers are already moving toward us while we are still wondering whether heaven has heard our prayers. And sometimes the most important message is written first within a heart before it is ever spoken aloud. As dawn prepared to arrive, your soulmate looked once more at the screen before them. Their fingers hovered over the keyboard. They wanted to write. They wanted to explain. They wanted to tell you everything that had happened today. But before they could type the very first sentence, something unexpected occurred that neither they nor you could have anticipated. And that moment would change the course of this story in ways that neither heart was prepared to imagine. The silence lingered longer than expected. The words your soulmate wanted to send remained unwritten, not because their heart had changed, but because they suddenly realized that some conversations deserve more honesty than haste. Their fingers rested above the keyboard as memories continued to unfold with a clarity they had never experienced before. Outside, the first light of morning quietly touched the horizon. It was an ordinary sunrise, yet it seemed to carry a gentle reminder that every new day offers another opportunity to choose wisdom over regret. They watched the sky brighten and wondered how many moments in life had slipped away simply because fear had spoken louder than truth. Throughout the day, unexpected reminders appeared. A familiar melody played in a nearby cafe. A passerby wore a color that reminded them of happier times. A simple act of kindness between strangers stirred emotions they believed had long faded. None of these moments were miraculous on their own, yet together they formed a quiet invitation to look inward rather than backward. As the hours passed, your soulmate stopped asking whether the past could be changed. Instead, they began asking a different question: what kind of person do I want to become from this moment forward? That question carried more hope than any answer they had searched for before. Growth rarely arrives with applause. It often comes through quiet decisions that no one else notices. It appears when pride is gently set aside, when compassion becomes stronger than judgment, and when a person chooses to learn instead of defend old misunderstandings. By evening, they understood something they had never fully accepted before. Real love is not measured only by grand declarations or dramatic moments. It is revealed in patience, humility, forgiveness, and the courage to admit when we have been wrong. With renewed peace, they finally began to write. This time, the message was not driven by panic or fear of losing something. It was written with sincerity, gratitude, and respect. Every sentence reflected the lessons they had learned during that remarkable day. Whether those words would ever be read was a question the future alone could answer. Yet for the first time in a long while, their heart felt lighter, not because every problem had disappeared, but because honesty had replaced uncertainty. And perhaps that is where every meaningful journey truly begins, not with perfect circumstances, but with a willing heart that chooses truth over fear and hope over despair. Days passed, and something unexpected began to change, not only within your soulmate, but within everyone they encountered. When a heart genuinely learns compassion, it quietly influences the way it speaks, listens, and responds to the world. The message they had written remained unsent for a little while longer. They read it again and again, removing every sentence that sounded like an excuse. They did not want their words to seek sympathy or erase the past. They wanted them to reflect honesty, gratitude, and the hope that even broken understanding can be restored through kindness. In the stillness of those evenings, they came to appreciate a truth that many overlook. Healing is rarely a single dramatic moment. More often, it is a collection of small choices made consistently. Choosing patience when frustration is easier, choosing forgiveness when resentment seems justified, and choosing humility when pride offers temporary comfort. Meanwhile, your own path continued to unfold. There were moments of joy, moments of uncertainty, and moments when you questioned whether every difficult season had served any purpose at all. Yet each experience had quietly strengthened your character in ways you could not fully see. Sometimes the greatest preparation for tomorrow is found in the challenges of yesterday. Every disappointment had taught resilience. Every unanswered question had encouraged deeper faith. Every delay had cultivated wisdom that could not have been gained any other way. As these separate journeys continued, neither of you could fully recognize how much growth had already taken place. Distance had not simply created absence, it had created reflection. Silence had not only separated. It had also allowed both hearts to listen more carefully to themselves. One quiet afternoon, your soulmate found an old journal tucked away among forgotten belongings. Between its pages were thoughts they had written long ago, dreams, fears, hopes, and questions that now seemed strangely familiar. Reading those words reminded them that people are constantly changing, learning, and becoming. They smiled softly, realizing they were no longer the same person who had once reacted without understanding. Life had refined them through experience, and that transformation deserved to continue. Looking toward the future no longer filled them with anxiety. Instead, it inspired gratitude for the opportunity to become kinder, wiser, and more compassionate than before. Whether paths eventually crossed again or remained separate, one lesson had become unmistakably clear. Genuine love is never diminished by growth. It becomes more patient, more gracious, and more willing to celebrate another person's well-being. And so, with renewed peace, they finally made a decision. They would no longer allow fear to dictate their next step. Whatever came afterward would be faced with honesty, respect, and courage, trusting that every sincere act of kindness carries value, even when its outcome remains unseen. The decision brought an unexpected sense of peace. For so long, your soulmate had believed that clarity would come only after every question had been answered. Instead, they discovered that peace often arrives first, making room for wisdom to follow. They stepped outside as evening settled over the world. The breeze carried the familiar sounds of everyday life, children laughing in the distance, leaves moving gently in the wind, and birds returning to their resting places. Nothing about the moment appeared extraordinary, yet everything seemed to invite quiet reflection. Looking back, they realized how easily fear can disguise itself as certainty. Assumptions had once felt like facts. Silence had been mistaken for indifference. Distance had been interpreted as the end of the story. But time had revealed that many conclusions are incomplete until compassion has the chance to speak. Your own journey had also been shaping something beautiful beneath the surface. The disappointments you had endured had not defined you, they had refined you. Every setback had quietly strengthened your patience. Every unanswered prayer had deepened your capacity to trust that life unfolds in seasons, each carrying lessons that cannot be hurried. There is a quiet strength found in those who continue to choose kindness even when no one applauds them. That strength becomes a light for others, often without them ever realizing it. As the days continued, your soulmate noticed how differently they responded to ordinary moments. Instead of rushing through each day, they began paying attention to the people around them. They listened more carefully. They judged less quickly. They offered encouragement where they once would have remained silent. Those small choices transformed more than their circumstances, they transformed their character. One afternoon, while sorting through old belongings, they came across a small keepsake that reminded them of a season when hope had seemed effortless. Holding it in their hands, they smiled, not because they wished to return to the past, but because they finally appreciated how much they had grown since then. Growth, they understood, is one of life's greatest gifts. It allows people to become gentler without becoming weaker, wiser without becoming cynical, and more loving without losing themselves. As night approached, they looked once more at the message they had carefully written. This time, they no longer wondered whether it was perfect. They simply hoped it reflected the truth that now lived within their heart. Whatever tomorrow would bring remained unknown, but they were no longer afraid of uncertainty. They had learned that sincere words, spoken with humility and respect, are never wasted. And somewhere beyond what either of you could fully understand, a new chapter was quietly preparing to begin, not because everything had become easy, but because both hearts had been changed by the lessons that came before. Morning arrived with a quiet sense of anticipation. Nothing in the world seemed outwardly different, yet both journeys had reached a place where fear no longer held the strongest voice. The questions that once demanded immediate answers had softened into a patient willingness to trust that every meaningful step would come at the right time. Your soulmate looked at the message one final time. They no longer searched for perfect words, because they had learned that sincerity carries more power than perfection. The message was simple. It expressed gratitude for what had been, acknowledged the misunderstandings that had caused pain, and wished for peace regardless of what the future might hold. Before pressing send, they paused. Not because they doubted their decision, but because they wanted every word to come from a place of humility rather than expectation. They understood that kindness cannot be offered with conditions attached. True reconciliation begins by releasing the desire to control the outcome. In that moment, they quietly whispered a prayer, not for everything to unfold according to their wishes, but for wisdom to accept whatever came next with grace. Elsewhere, your own heart continued moving forward. You had learned that hope is strongest when it is rooted in faith instead of certainty. The experiences that once felt like heavy burdens had slowly become sources of compassion, allowing you to understand the struggles of others more deeply than before. Life has a remarkable way of preparing people separately before bringing them into moments that truly matter. Every lesson, every delay, every unexpected turn had contributed something valuable to your character. None of it had been meaningless. As the day unfolded, ordinary acts of kindness seemed to appear everywhere. A stranger offered encouragement to someone in need. Friends reconciled after a misunderstanding. Someone forgave an old hurt that had been carried for years. These quiet moments served as reminders that the world is changed not only through extraordinary events, but through countless small decisions made with love. Your soulmate finally smiled, not because every regret had disappeared, but because they no longer allowed regret to define them. The past could teach them, but it no longer imprisoned them. With calm determination, they took a deep breath and sent the message. At that instant, they released every expectation about how it would be received. They had done what they believed was right. The rest belonged to time, patience, and the freedom of another person's heart. Whether that message marked the beginning of a renewed connection or simply became a quiet expression of gratitude, it had already fulfilled an important purpose. It reflected a heart that had chosen honesty over fear, humility over pride, and hope over despair. And perhaps that is the greatest transformation of all. Not that every story ends exactly as we imagine, but that every sincere act of love leaves the person who offers it stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. As evening settled once again, both paths continued forward beneath the same sky, carrying with them the quiet assurance that healing is never wasted. Even when its results cannot yet be seen, every step taken in truth becomes part of a larger journey toward peace, understanding, and lasting hope.